The glass was already at her lips when the Duke of Wardley saw her face change. Rosamund Fenn had been laughing a moment before, quietly, into her shoulder, at something the old rector had said about the marrow competition, and now she was not laughing at all. She held the wine an inch from her mouth and breathed it in, and her eyes came up the whole length of the table, past 30 candles and 40 guests and a centerpiece of hothouse grapes, and found somebody. Not him. Somebody else. Alaric Cray had spent 9 years learning to read a room the way other men read weather, and he read this one in the space of a heartbeat and could make nothing of it. He saw only that the poorest woman at his mother's harvest dinner had gone the color of tallow, and that her hand was perfectly steady. Then she drank it. She drank the whole glass, deliberately in 3 swallows, with her chin up, the way a soldier takes a dose. She set the empty glass down on the cloth and turned it a quarter turn, so that the crest on the bowl faced the candles. "Your Grace," she said, into the general noise, and her voice carried the way a bell carries, "will you keep this glass?" The table did not hear her. The Duke did. "Miss Fenn, this glass and the decanter it came from, do not let either be washed." She was already reaching for the salt cellar and pouring salt into her own water tumbler and stirring it with the handle of a fork, and her hand had begun now, only now, to shake. "Send for Dr. Vellicott at Ackworth. Tell him foxglove. Tell him a strong tincture of the leaf in canary wine, and that it has been in me perhaps 40 seconds. Alaric was on his feet. Chairs went back all down the table. A woman said, "Good heavens," in the bright tone of one who expects a joke. "Tarrant," said the Duke of Wardley, and his butler was at his elbow. "2 men to that decanter and that glass. Nobody touches them, nobody clears them, not my mother, not me. The fastest horse in the stable to Ackworth for Vellicott, and the second fastest to Denbury for Mr. Prowse. Then clear this room." "Your Grace, the guests." "Clear this room." Rosamund Fenn drank the salt water down, and it did what salt water does, and she was past being ashamed of it. And Alaric put his coat around her shoulders and got her out of the dining room by the service door before the worst of it. Because, whatever else happened in this house tonight, she was not going to be a spectacle. She managed the corridor. She managed half the back stairs. On the turn of them her knees simply stopped answering, and he caught her and lifted her, and she weighed nothing at all, a woman who had walked 11 miles that week to sit with a dying carter and had eaten, he suspected, very little of it. "Your Grace," she said against his shoulder, "the glass. 2 men are standing over it. They will try to wash it. Somebody will say the servants must not be idle, and it will go to the scullery, and then there is no case at all, only a woman who was taken ill at dinner." Her breath had gone shallow and slow, too slow. "Do you understand? There will be nothing left but my word, and my word is worth." "Your word," said Alaric Cray, "is worth every other word spoken in this house tonight put together. Be quiet now. Save it." They put her in the Chinese bedchamber, which was the nearest, and which had not been slept in since his grandmother died, and Mrs. Ilsley, the housekeeper, cut her out of her gown with sewing shears, because there was no time for 40 hooks, and Dr. Vellicott came up the avenue at a gallop at 20 minutes past 10 with his coat over his nightshirt. "Foxglove works on the heart." Vellicott said so bluntly, standing over the bed with 2 fingers on her wrist and his watch open in his other hand, and he said it in the tone of a man who wishes to be understood once and not asked again. "Her pulse is 940 and dropping, Your Grace. It will drop further before morning, and it will go irregular, and she will be sick, and she will see the room swim and the candles ring, and she may say things she does not mean." The dose was a strong one. Whoever made that tincture knew the trade. He shut the watch. She did herself more good with the salt water in 10 seconds than I shall do her all night. She is a clever woman. Will she live? That depends on her heart, which I have never had occasion to doubt, and on the next 30 hours. Velicott looked at him over his spectacles. Your Grace, go to bed. No, said the Duke of Wardley. He did not go to bed for 4 days. It began as a matter of guarding the evidence and became, at some point in that first gray dawn, something he did not attempt to name. He sat in a hard chair at the foot of the bed, with the door open to the corridor, and a lamp turned low, and every hour Velicott counted her pulse and wrote the number in a pocket book, and every hour Alaric heard the number and did not react, because there was nobody in the room to react for. 9:40, 6:40, 2:40 at 4 in the morning, and the doctor's mouth thinning. Downstairs, his mother's harvest dinner was being talked into shape as an indisposition. A chill, an oyster, the heat of the room. Wardley Court had 40 guests in it who all had opinions, and by breakfast there were 3 versions running. And in the most popular of them, Miss Rosamund Fenn had taken something herself, on purpose, out of despair, because everybody knew she was the last of a ruined family and lived in a cottage with her father's herbals and no prospects at all, and had lately been noticed by the Duke, and had perhaps been given to understand that being noticed was as far as it went. Alaric heard that version at 8:30 from his own mother, who repeated it to him with her hands twisted together, not because she believed it, but because she wanted, badly, to be told what to believe. They are saying she did it to herself, said the Dowager Duchess. In my dining room, Alaric, is it possible? She named the poison before it had taken hold, said Alaric. She named the plant, the part of the plant, the preparation, and the vehicle it came in. She asked me to preserve the glass. Mother, if a woman wishes to end her own life, she does not first instruct a duke on how to gather proof against another person. The dowager sat down slowly on the window seat. Then somebody in this house. Yes, said the Duke of Wardley. They had met, he and Rosamund Fenn, over a dying man. It had been in June, at the far end of the Wardley estate, in a cottage at Fenn's Hollow that had given her family its name 300 years ago, when the Fenns had owned the land instead of merely being buried in it. His carter Bassett had gone under a loaded wagon on the Ackworth Road, and Alaric, who had been half a mile off on a gray mare and had heard the noise, had got there to find a woman in a stuff apron already kneeling in the ruts with her hand inside the man's coat, pressing, and her sleeve black to the elbow. She had not looked up. She had said, "You are large. Kneel here and press where my hand is hard, and do not let go when he cries out." He had knelt in the mud of his own road in a coat that cost more than the wagon, and done exactly as he was told for 25 minutes. Bassett lived. Velicott, arriving at the end of it, said flatly that he would not have. And that evening, the Duke of Wardley had walked up to a 2-room cottage with a still room built onto the back of it, and found the walls hung with bunches of drying stuff, and the shelves crowded with labeled jars in a small precise hand, and a shabby young woman washing blood out of a sleeve she plainly could not afford to lose. My father was a physician, she had said, before the money went. He taught me the still room because there was nothing else to leave me. I do not take fees, your grace, so there is nothing improper in it, and the rector allows it, and I would be obliged if you did not stop me. Why in the world, Alaric had said, would I stop you? Between June and October, he had found a remarkable number of reasons to ride to Fenn's Hollow. A tenant's fever, a question about the water at Ackworth Mill, a book of his grandfather's on the diseases of sheep, which she wanted, and he did not, and which took 4 separate journeys to deliver on account of the weather. By September the whole estate knew. By October the county knew, and the county did what counties do, which is to divide itself into those who thought it charming and those who thought it intolerable. And the second party was larger and better connected, and included every woman within 30 miles who had a daughter. It had included, in particular, Miss Sidney Latchmere. He thought about that at 4 in the morning, in the hard chair, listening to a woman breathe too slowly. Sidney Latchmere had been at the dinner. Sidney Latchmere was, in a sense the lawyers had never quite settled. Part of the furniture of Wardley, her late father, had been Alaric's guardian through the 8 bad years after the old Duke died, and her aunt Lady Cressida Latchmere had run the court's household in that time, and Sidney had learned the corridors of this house before she learned to read. She was handsome, and 30, and had spent a decade being introduced as the young lady who is quite one of the family. She had sat 4 places from Rosamund Fenn. She had, he remembered with the slow clarity of exhaustion, been very attentive at the moment the canary wine went round. "Your Grace," Vellicott's voice low, "come here." Alaric came. 9:30, said the doctor, and irregular. I am going to say this once. If it goes below 30 or if it goes soft, there is nothing in my bag or God's earth that I can do about it, and you should have the rector fetched now rather than at 3 in the morning tomorrow. He closed his watch. And if she wakes, she may wake, she will be frightened. She has no family, not one. There is nobody in England obliged to sit with her. The Duke of Wardley looked down at the woman in his grandmother's bed. "There is now," he said, and sat down in the hard chair, and did not get out of it again until Thursday. She woke a little before dawn on the second day, and thought she was in her own cottage. "The pennyroyal wants turning," she said clearly, to the bed curtains. "It will mold if it is not turned." "It shall be turned," said Alaric. Her eyes came round to him, enormous in a face gone to paper, and he watched her assemble the world piece by piece. The strange room, the lamp, the doctor asleep upright in a chair by the fire, the Duke of Wardley in yesterday's shirt with 2 days of beard on him and his cravat gone entirely. "Oh," she said, "it was not a dream then." "No." "How long?" 31 hours. The glass. In the strong room of the estate office with the decanter, sealed with my seal, witnessed by Tarrant and Mr. Prowse the magistrate, and half an inch of the dregs of each gone to a chemist in town who does work for the assizes. He leaned forward. "Miss Fenn, Vellicott says you may not talk long, so tell me only this. When you lifted that glass, whom did you look at?" Rosamund Fenn was quiet for so long that he thought she had gone under again. "I will not say," she said. "You will not." "I will not say because I looked up out of pure animal shock and my eye fell where it fell, and I would not hang a dog on it." Her fingers moved weakly on the counterpane. "I know what I smelled. I do not know whose hand poured it. If I name a person now in this state in this house, then whatever comes after will have been shaped by me, and any lawyer alive will say so. Find it out, your Grace. Do not have it from me. I am the worst witness in England. I am poor, and I am unmarried, and you have been seen at my door." He sat back. "You thought that out," he said, "while the poison was going down your throat." "I thought it out while the glass was under my nose." Her mouth curved, the smallest fraction. "It is a very good glass. It smells of nothing at all but what is in it. Cut crystal does not lie." "Why did you drink it?" The curve went out of her mouth. "Because I could smell it and no one else could," she said. Because if I had put it down and cried poison in front of 40 people, with my sleeve mended at the elbow, I should have been removed from the room and pitied, and the decanter would have been carried out and rinsed within the minute. And in a month there would have been another glass in another room, and it might have gone to your mother. Or to you. Her eyes closed. So I drank the proof and told you not to wash it. It was not brave. It was arithmetic. The Duke of Wardley discovered that he had to stand and go to the window for a moment. 40 seconds, he said, when he could. You said 40 seconds. You began counting the instant you set the glass down. Of course I counted. Velicott needed to know the interval. Miss Fenn, said Alaric, I have commanded men. I have never in my life met anyone so difficult to be gallant to. Then do not be gallant, said Rosamund Fenn, already sliding back toward sleep. Be useful. There will be a second attempt. There always is, when the first fails and the failure is talked of. Whoever it was must now be very much more afraid of me alive than they ever were of me at dinner. He set a chair against the inside of the door that night, and moved the lamp so that it lit the doorway and not the bed, and did not sleep. The second attempt came on the third night, at 2:15, and it came in a cup of posset. The woman who carried it in was Betsy Rook, an under-housemaid of 19, and she got 3 steps into the room before she saw that the enormous shadow in the chair by the door was awake and looking at her, and the cup went out of her hands and broke on the floorboards. Your Grace, she dropped like a stone. Your Grace, I never Mrs. Ilsley never sent me. I know she never, only I was told. Get up, said Alaric. I never knew what was in it. I swear before God I never. Get up, Betsy, and sit in that chair, and do not weep yet, because you have not yet done anything you cannot come back from. He crouched and gathered 2 of the larger fragments of the cup with the posset still in them, and set them on the washstand out of the way of the cat that lived in the passage. Now, who told you to bring it? The girl told him. She told him in a rush, with her apron over her face, and she told him again an hour later in front of Mr. Prowse the magistrate with a clerk taking it down, and the substance of it never changed. She had been told by Miss Latchmere's own woman, Hepsy Doone, that Miss Latchmere was concerned for the poor young lady above stairs, and had made her up a posset with her own hands as a kindness, and that Betsy was to carry it up quietly and not disturb his Grace, who was overwrought, and above all not to say where it came from, because Miss Latchmere did not care to have her charity talked of. And you thought nothing of that, said Prowse, the very night after a woman was poisoned in this house. Sir, Miss Latchmere is the family, said Betsy Rook, and looked at the magistrate as though he had asked her why the sun came up. She has been the family since before I was born. Alaric Cray stood at the window of his own estate office at 3 in the morning, and looked at his own dark park and understood, at last and completely, how it had been done. Not by a monster, by the family, by a woman who had known the corridors of Wardley Court since she was 5 years old, and could send for a decanter and be obeyed, and could stand in a still room or a still room passage, or the housekeeper's closet, and be nodded to, and whose word to a housemaid at 2 in the morning carried more weight in this house than his own physician's. The chemist's report came from town on Thursday afternoon. It was 4 lines long and written in the flat, disobliging hand of a man who had done a great deal of this sort of work. The dregs of the glass and the dregs of the decanter both contained a strong spirituous tincture of the leaf of the common foxglove, at a strength consistent with a medicinal preparation reduced by evaporation. That is, deliberately concentrated, and the quantity in the glass, had it been retained, would in the chemist's opinion have been sufficient. Sufficient, Alaric read the word 3 times. Then he sent for Mrs. Ilsley, and asked her one question: whether any person not of the household had been in the butler's pantry between 6 and 8 o'clock on the evening of the harvest dinner. "Only Miss Latchmere, your grace," said the housekeeper, and her face was white. "She came for the canary. She always sees to the canary and the ratafia when there is a dinner. It has been her office in this house since Lady Cressida's time, and Tarrant does not gainsay her. And your grace, she asked me which glass was to be Miss Fenn's, on account of Miss Fenn being placed low down at the table, and she said it would be a kindness to see that the poor young lady was not overlooked in the pouring." The Duke of Wardley put both hands flat on his desk. "Mrs. Ilsley," he said, "say that again to Mr. Prowse, exactly as you have said it to me. And then oblige me by finding out where Hepsy Doone has been buying her mistress's headache drops." Hepsy Doone had been buying them, it transpired, at the shop of a Mr. Lull in Ackworth, who kept his poisons book as the law required and was very ready indeed to show it to a duke and a magistrate together. There were 3 entries in it in the last 5 weeks against the name Doone, servant to Miss Latchmere of Wardley Court, 2 of laudanum, unremarkable, and 1, on the 22nd of September, of a full ounce of tincture of digitalis, purchased for a dropsical aunt. "And has Miss Latchmere a dropsical aunt?" asked Prowse. "She has Lady Cressida," said Alaric, "who is 61 and rides to hounds." He went upstairs afterwards, and found Rosamund Fenn sitting up for the first time, propped on 3 pillows, being fed beef tea by his mother's own hand, which was a thing he had not expected to see in this life. Her pulse that morning had been 58 and steady. Velicott had gone home to sleep for the first time in 4 days. She looked at his face and set the cup aside. "You have it," she said. "Do you wish to know before Prowse takes it further?" "No," said Rosamund. "I told you, do not have it from me." Then, after a moment, quietly, "But you will tell me one thing. Was it done for money or for you?" Alaric Cray sat down on the edge of the bed, which was improper, and which his mother chose to inspect the window curtains rather than notice. "For me," he said, "which I find I cannot separate from money, because the two have never been separable in this house, and because, Miss Fenn, I have been 3 days learning something about my own life that I did not know on Monday. There is a person under this roof who has spent 25 years being told she was quite one of the family, and was permitted to believe that the rest would follow, and was never once contradicted by me, because contradicting her would have been awkward, and I am a man who has always had the option of not being awkward." He looked at his hands. "You said something to me in June that I did not understand at the time. You said you did not take fees, so there was nothing improper. You had thought about your position. I have never once in my life had to think about mine." "That is what a dukedom is for," said Rosamund Fenn dryly. "It is not what it is for," said the Duke of Wardley, "and on Saturday I intend to prove it in my own drawing-room in front of everybody who is still in this house. I should like you to be there, not to speak, only to be seen sitting down in a good chair at the front." Rosamund considered him for a long moment over the beef tea. "I have nothing to wear," she said, "except a gown that was cut off me with shears." "Mother," said Alaric, without turning round. "Grey silk," said the Dowager Duchess of Wardley instantly, from the window, "with the Honiton lace at the throat, and my grandmother's pearls, and Mrs. Ilsley can alter the bodice by Friday if she puts 2 girls on it. Alaric, go away. We have a great deal to do, and you smell like a stable." On Saturday, the long drawing-room at Wardley Court held 31 people, and not one of them knew why. They had been asked to remain by the Duke himself, in a note of 2 sentences delivered to each bedchamber, and nobody had refused, because, When a duke asks a house full of guests to stay 4 days longer than they intended, the guests discover that they have no other engagements at all. Alaric had the room arranged as he wanted it. No table, no dais, nothing theatrical. Only the chairs drawn into a wide half-circle, and the October light coming in hard and gray from the west windows, and Mr. Prowse the magistrate seated at a small writing table with his clerk beside him, and the Poison's book of Mr. Lull of Ackworth open in front of him at the 22nd of September. Rosamund Fenn sat at the front, in gray silk with Honiton lace at the throat and pearls that had belonged to a duchess, so thin that the pearls hung wrong, upright as a birch. Miss Sidney Latchmere sat 6 chairs from her, beside her aunt. She was handsome that day. Alaric noted it with a kind of distant wonder that a woman could be handsome and composed and beautifully gloved on such a morning. She had, he supposed, no reason yet to think the morning anything but tiresome. "You have been kept here," said the Duke of Wardley, standing where they could all see him, "because on Monday evening at my mother's table, in a glass poured from my decanter, a guest of this house was given a strong concentrated tincture of foxglove leaf, sufficient to kill her. She smelled it. She drank it in front of you all, and asked me to preserve the glass, because she judged correctly that a poor woman crying poison in a duke's dining-room would be carried out, and the vessel rinsed inside a minute. She has been 4 days in my grandmother's bed with her pulse at 9:30. Dr. Vellicott will speak to that presently if anyone wishes it." The silence in the room was total, and had a strange quality, like the silence in a church when the roof creaks. "You have all spent 4 days discussing it," Alaric went on evenly. "I have heard 6 versions. In the most popular of them, Miss Fenn did it to herself out of despair, on account of a connection with me which had gone as far as it was ever going to go. I want that version killed in this room this morning by people who were present, so that it does not walk out of my gates on Monday and live for 20 years. He turned to the writing table. "Mr. Prowse, in your own words and briefly." It took 11 minutes. It was, as evidence goes, extremely dull. The chemist's 4 lines, Mrs. Ilsley on the butler's pantry between 6 and 8, and on who had asked which glass was to be Miss Fenn's. Betsy Rook, brought in trembling in a clean apron, on a posset at 2:15 on Wednesday night, and who had told her to carry it and not to say where it came from. Hepsy Doone, who had been taken before the magistrate on Friday and had by then said a great deal. And the Poison's book, 1 ounce of tincture of digitalis, purchased for a dropsical aunt. At the phrase dropsical aunt, Lady Cressida Latchmere made a small sound. Alaric did not look at her. He was watching Sidonie. The composure did not break in any way that the rest of the room could see. What happened was smaller, and, he thought afterwards, far worse. She turned her head a little and looked around the half-circle of chairs, at the rector, at Lady Wayman, at the Farnaby girls, at every face she had known since childhood, and found no face at all that was on her side. And Alaric watched 25 years of certainty go out of her like water out of a cracked jug. "Sidonie," he said, "do you wish to say anything?" "You brought her into this house," said Miss Latchmere. Her voice was quite pleasant. That was the thing he remembered longest. "I have lived in this house since I was 5 years old. I have kept your mother's keys and your father's accounts and your aunt's temper, and I have sat at that table below the salt for 11 years, while girls of 19 were brought down from London and paraded past you. And I bore all of it, because it was understood, Alaric, it was understood by every soul in this county, that at the end of it there was to be a settlement. And then in June you knelt in the mud of the Ackworth Road for a cottage woman with blood on her sleeve, and by Michaelmas you had ridden to Fenn's Hollow 19 times. Her gloved hands lay still in her lap. 19. I counted them from the west window, so you will forgive me if I do not think the wrong done in this house on Monday was the only wrong done in it. Sidonie, said her aunt in a whisper, for God's sake be silent. There was no settlement, said Alaric Cray. There was never a settlement. There was a great deal of not being contradicted, which I permitted, because it was more comfortable for me than the alternative, and I have spent 4 nights in a hard chair, understanding that a man's comfort can be a kind of lie that other people pay for. That is mine, and I own it, and I shall carry it. But it is not this. He drew a slow breath. You put an ounce of digitalis into a decanter of Canary wine, and you asked my housekeeper which glass was to be hers, and when it failed, you sent a girl of 19 up the back stairs at 2 in the morning to finish it. Nothing that was done to you in this house makes that anything but what it is. The room waited. Mr. Prowse, said the Duke of Wardley, the charge is attempted murder, and you will tell them what that means. It means the assizes at Lent, said Prowse flatly, and on this evidence, your grace, it means the gallows. Somebody in the half-circle began to cry. It was not Sidonie Latchmere. It was one of the Farnaby girls, who was 17 and had thought all week that she was at a very interesting house party. And then Rosamund Fenn stood up. She stood carefully, with one hand on the chair back, and everybody in the room turned, and the gray silk hung on her like a flag on a still day. Mr. Prowse, she said, the injury was to me. Is that correct? It is, madam. Then may I be heard before it goes to the assizes? You may. Rosamund Fenn looked at the woman 6 chairs away for a long moment. I do not forgive you, she said. I want that plainly said, because there will be people who tell this story afterwards and make me softer than I am. You meant me to die at a dinner table, in front of strangers, in a mended gown, and to be spoken of afterwards as a poor creature who had taken something out of despair. I do not forgive it, and I do not expect to. And when my heart goes strangely at night for the rest of my life, Dr. Vellicott says it may, I shall think of you. She turned to the magistrate. But I will not stand at the assizes at Lent and be examined for 2 days by a barrister about how often the Duke of Wardley came to my cottage, and I will not have the last thing I do in this world be to put a rope on a woman's neck. So I ask this instead. Let her write it out, all of it, in her own hand, signed and witnessed and lodged with you, sir, and a copy with the Duke's lawyers. Let it be read aloud once here this morning to these 31 people, so that no version but the true one leaves this house. And then let her be gone from England to whatever relation will take her, on an allowance that keeps her decently and not 1 shilling more. And if she ever sets foot in this county again, let the paper be produced and the law take its course. Miss Fenn, said Prowse, that is a great deal of mercy. It is not mercy at all, said Rosamund Fenn. Mercy would be to let her keep her name. She will go to Lisbon or wherever it is with her own confession sitting in a strong box in Ackworth for the rest of her life, and every person in this room will know what she did, and she will never again be told by anybody that she is quite one of the family. Ask her which she would rather have. Sidonie Latchmere looked up at her then, and whatever passed between the 2 women was not for the room. She wrote it that afternoon in the library at the Duke's own desk, with Prowse's clerk at her elbow, and it ran to 5 pages, and it was read aloud at 6 o'clock to 31 people who did not move. Lady Cressida Latchmere left Wardley Court the next morning at 7 and never entered it again. Her niece sailed from Falmouth on the 9th of November. The county talked for 2 years, but it talked, from the beginning, in the one true version, and there was never any other to be had, and that was the whole of what Rosamund Fenn had asked for. He proposed to her in the still room at Fenn's Hollow in December, and made a poor job of it. She had insisted on going home as soon as she could walk a mile, which had caused the only real quarrel of their lives, and he had lost it, and had then quietly had the cottage roof stripped and relaid, and a new range put in while she was still too weak to argue about that either. He found her turning the pennyroyal. "You have come 19 more times," said Rosamund, without looking round. "I counted from the west window in the manor of the county." "Miss Fenn." "Your Grace." "There is a room at Wardley on the north side of the kitchen court," said the Duke of Wardley, "with a slate floor and a north light and a well of its own, and it has been used since my grandfather's day for storing hampers. It would make a still room 40 feet long. There is money for a garden of simples, and for the wall to be built high enough for the tender things, and for a girl or two to be taught the trade properly, and for the dispensary at Ackworth that Vellicott has wanted for 11 years and never had a penny toward." He turned his hat over in his hands, which was undignified, and he had stopped minding. "None of that requires you to marry me. I want that understood before I ask, because you are the only person I have ever met who would refuse a dukedom on a point of arithmetic. The dispensary is built either way. The still room is yours either way." Rosamund Fenn set down the pennyroyal. "And the other part," she said. "The other part is that I sat 4 days in a hard chair listening to a doctor count your pulse," said Alaric, "and at 2:40 on the Tuesday morning I understood that I had spent 9 years being a duke and about 4 months being a man, and that the 4 months were the only ones I should want back. I am asking you to marry me, not because you nearly died in my house, because you thought it out in the second before you drank, and you got it right, and you told me not to wash the glass." His voice went rough. "Rosamund, nobody has ever taken care of me the way you did in the worst 40 seconds of your life." She came across the slate floor and put her hands flat on his chest, over his heart, the way she had once put her hand inside a carter's coat, as though she were listening for something. "Steady," she said. "Good. Is that a yes?" "Cut crystal does not lie, your Grace," said Rosamund Fenn, "and neither do I yes." They were married at Ackworth in February, and she walked up the aisle on Dr. Vellicott's arm because there was nobody else, and the church held 400 people, of whom perhaps 11 had been asked, and the rest had simply come. The still room at Wardley Court runs the whole north side of the kitchen court, and the labels on the jars are in a small, precise hand, and there is a bench along the window where a great grim man in shirt-sleeves has been known to sit of an evening being examined on the difference between Bettany and Bugle, and getting it wrong, and being laughed at. He never learned to smell foxglove. He tried for years. She made him try, laughing, holding the leaf under his nose in the summer garden, and he never could tell it from anything else, and she told him it did not matter in the least, because there was no need for 2 of them. But at Wardley, from that year on, the Duke's own glass and the Duchess's are poured at table by the Duke's own hand from a decanter he carries in himself, every night, in front of everybody, and no guest has ever once been permitted to think it strange. The old cut crystal glass with the crest on the bowl is still in the strong room of the estate office. He has never had it washed,